In the forgotten corners of the vast desert, where the sun burned so hot that shadows themselves seemed to catch fire, there lived a woman they called the Desert Witch. Her name was Nasira, and she was neither witch nor monster, though fear and ignorance had painted her as both. She was simply a woman who had been wronged, who had lost everything, and who had learned to wield power that most could not comprehend. When Commander Tarek of the Northern Guard destroyed her village in the name of security, executing her innocent brother as a suspected rebel, she did what any soul pushed beyond breaking would do. She cursed him. She called upon ancient fire magic, upon powers that slept in the deep places of the world, and she marked Tarek with flames that would never stop burning, that would consume him slowly from within until nothing remained but ash and regret. But curses have a way of binding both the giver and the receiver, and Nasira would discover too late that destroying her enemy would also destroy the only chance she had left at redemption, at peace at becoming something more than the monster others believed her to be. This is the story of a curse that became a connection, of hatred that transformed into understanding, of two people who should have been eternal enemies learning that sometimes salvation comes from the most unexpected source. The Northern Guard is the military force that protects the trade routes connecting the desert kingdoms to the mountain territories beyond. They are well-trained, well-equipped, and utterly ruthless in their mission to maintain order and suppress any threat to commerce and stability. Commander Tarek has served in the Guard for 15 years, rising through the ranks through a combination of tactical brilliance and unwavering commitment to duty. He is 38 years old, tall and powerfully built, his face weathered by sun and wind, his dark eyes sharp with intelligence and hardened by the things he has seen and done. He wears his authority like armor, never questioning his orders, never allowing emotion to interfere with necessity. To him the world is simple. There are those who follow the law and those who threaten it, and his job is to eliminate the threats before they can spread. He has done terrible things in service of this belief, authorized raids on suspected rebel camps, ordered executions of those deemed dangerous, burned villages that harbored fugitives. He tells himself these actions are necessary, that individual suffering is acceptable if it prevents larger chaos. He sleeps well at night because he believes absolutely in the righteousness of his cause. The village of Kethra was one such target. Intelligence suggested it harbored rebel sympathizers planning attacks on trade caravans. Tarek's orders were clear: investigate, identify the guilty parties, and eliminate them. He led his squad into Kethra at dawn, 50 soldiers against a village of perhaps 200 souls, most of them farmers and herders living simple lives far from any conflict. They rounded up the villagers in the central square, demanded to know who among them aided the rebels. Fear made people speak, and names were given, some true, some false, some offered simply to deflect suspicion. One name that emerged repeatedly was Halil, a young man of 23 known for his outspoken criticism of the Guard's methods, his passionate speeches about justice and freedom. Tarek had him dragged forward, questioned him harshly. Halil denied being a rebel, insisted he was simply a teacher who believed in speaking truth, but Tarek saw only defiance in his eyes, heard only sedition in his words. The decision was made quickly. An example needed to be set. Halil was executed in the square, his sister Nasira screaming and fighting against the soldiers who held her back, her pleas for mercy falling on ears deafened by duty and certainty. Tarek gave the order himself, his voice steady and emotionless, and he watched as his lieutenant carried it out with professional efficiency. He did not enjoy killing, took no pleasure in it, but he also felt no guilt. This was war, even if most people did not recognize it as such. One death now might prevent 100 later. That was the calculation he made, the justification he lived by. The guard left Kethra that same day, moving on to other assignments, other missions. Tarek filed his report, marked the operation as successful, and thought nothing more of it. He did not know that Nasira was not simply Halil's sister, but his only family, the person he had raised after their parents died when she was a child. He did not know that Halil had been her entire world, her teacher, her protector, her reason for enduring in a harsh land that offered little mercy. He did not know that in killing Halil, he had not eliminated a threat, but created one far more dangerous than any rebel fighter could ever be, because Nasira, in her grief and rage, went seeking power, and in the desert, power always comes with a price. 3 weeks after her brother's death, Nasira walked into the deep desert, following half-remembered stories her grandmother had told, legends of old magic that slept in forgotten places, waiting for those desperate or brave enough to wake it. She walked for days without adequate supplies, her body pushed to the edge of death, her mind focused on a single purpose, vengeance. She would make Tarek suffer as she suffered. She would take from him what he took from her. She would burn him as her heart burned with loss. The desert tested her, offered her 100 chances to turn back, to choose survival over revenge, but she refused every mercy, every easy path. And eventually the desert recognized her determination, her willingness to pay any price, and it led her to the altar of ancient flames. The altar was nothing more than a circle of blackened stones in a valley where no living thing grew, where the sand itself was fused into glass by fires so intense they had burned centuries ago and never fully extinguished. At the center of the circle was a pit, and in that pit fire still burned, not normal flame, but something older, darker, hungry. Nasira knelt before the pit and spoke the words her grandmother had taught her, words in a language she did not fully understand, but whose meaning resonated in her bones. She offered her blood, her pain, her very soul to the ancient fire, and she asked for the power to curse her enemy, to mark him with flames that would never die, that would consume him slowly and ensure his death would be long and agonizing. The fire answered. It rose from the pit in a column of dark flame, wrapping around Nasira, burning through her without destroying her, marking her in ways both visible and invisible. When she staggered away from the altar 3 days later, she was changed. Her eyes held embers where pupils should be. Her skin was hot to the touch. Her voice crackled like burning wood, and she carried within her the power to curse with fire, to mark another with the same flames that had marked her. She walked back toward civilization, toward the places where the Northern Guard operated, following rumors and reports until she found Tarek's patrol in the Iron Valley, a canyon where the Guard maintained a watchtower. She waited until night, until he was alone, and then she walked into his camp as if she belonged there, her presence barely noticed until she stood directly before him in his command tent. Tarek looked up from his maps, his hand moving instinctively toward his sword, but Nasira was faster. She placed her hand against his chest. directly over his heart, and she spoke the curse. Words of ancient fire, of eternal burning, of slow consumption. Dark flames erupted from her palm, searing into Tarek's flesh, marking him with a symbol that glowed like heated metal, a spiral of fire that pulsed with its own heartbeat. Tarek screamed, the pain beyond anything he had ever experienced, as if his very blood had been set ablaze. He struck at Nasira, but she was already gone, vanished into the night, leaving only her voice echoing in his mind. You killed my brother. You destroyed my world. Now you will burn as I have burned. The fire will consume you from within, day by day, hour by hour, until nothing remains. And when you die, it will not be quick or merciful. You will suffer as Halil suffered, as I suffer. This is my gift to you, Commander. Live with it if you can. Guards rushed into the tent, but there was no one to fight, no enemy to engage. Only Tarek on his knees, the mark on his chest blazing, his body shaking with agony. They carried him to the medical tents, called for healers, tried every remedy they knew, but nothing helped. The fire was not physical, not entirely. It was woven into his spirit, his essence, and it burned constantly, relentlessly, giving no respite. By morning, Tarek understood that he was dying. The healers confirmed it. The curse was consuming his life force, burning through his vitality at a steady rate. They estimated he had perhaps 6 months before the fire consumed him completely. 6 months of increasing pain, of slow deterioration, of watching himself wasted away by flames no one else could see, but which he felt every moment of every day. For the first week, Tarek raged against his fate. He ordered his entire guard to search for the witch, to find Nasira and force her to remove the curse. But she had disappeared into the desert as if she had never existed, leaving no trail, no trace. He consulted every mystic, every healer, every scholar of magic within 100 miles, offering fortunes for a cure. None could help. The curse was too deeply rooted, too expertly crafted. It would take the one who cast it to undo it, and she was gone. Desperation drove Tarek to do something he had never done before. He questioned his own actions. In the long nights when pain made sleep impossible, when the fire in his chest burned so hot he thought he might actually combust, he thought about Kethra, about the execution he had ordered, about the young man who had died while his sister screamed. He had not bothered to learn their names at the time, but investigations conducted after Nasira's attack had revealed the full story. Halil had not been a rebel. He had been a teacher, a poet, someone who spoke out against injustice, but who had never taken up arms, never committed violence. The intelligence that marked him as a threat had been false, born from personal grudges and fear rather than fact. Tarek had killed an innocent man, and in doing so he had created the very monster he thought he was preventing. The realization did not come all at once. It built slowly, painfully, over weeks of suffering and reflection. Tarek began reviewing his past operations, really examining them for the first time with critical eyes rather than the lens of duty and necessity. How many other innocents had died on his orders? How many villages had been destroyed for harboring enemies who did not actually exist? How many families had been shattered because he never questioned his intelligence, never doubted his mission, never allowed himself to see the people he was killing as anything more than threats to be eliminated? The answers horrified him, not because he discovered he was evil, but because he discovered he was ordinary, He was a man following orders, doing his duty, serving what he believed was a greater good, and in the process he had become the very thing he thought he was fighting against. He had become terror incarnate to people like Nasira, people whose only crime was existing in the wrong place at the wrong time, people whose loved ones died because it was easier to kill than to investigate, simpler to destroy than to understand. 2 months into the curse, Tarek resigned his commission. His superiors accepted reluctantly, assuming he was leaving to seek treatment for his condition. They were partly right, but his true reason was simpler. He could not continue doing what he had been doing. He could not keep killing in the name of order when he finally understood what that really meant. He left the Northern Guard and began a different kind of search. Not for a cure, though he still wanted to live, but for Nasira herself. Not to force her to remove the curse, but to do something he should have done 2 months ago, something he should have done before he gave the order to execute Halil. He went searching for her to apologize. The desert is vast and unforgiving, but Tarek had resources and experience that most did not. He tracked rumors of a fire witch, stories of a woman with ember eyes who appeared in remote settlements, who helped sometimes and vanished always, who seemed to be searching for something she could never find. He followed these stories across hundreds of miles, through sandstorms and scorching days, his body growing weaker as the curse continued its work, his strength slowly ebbing. The mark on his chest had spread, dark veins of fire creeping outward, and he knew his time was running short. 4 months into the curse, he finally found her. She was living in the ruins of an ancient watchtower, a structure so old it predated any current kingdom, built by people whose names had been forgotten. The tower stood alone in a sea of dunes, half collapsed, its stones blackened by some long-ago fire. Tarek approached at sunset, unarmed, his hands visible and empty. He called out before he entered, giving her warning, giving her the choice to flee or fight. She chose neither. She waited in what had once been the tower's main chamber, sitting on a fallen stone, her ember eyes watching him with an expression he could not read. Hatred, certainly, but also weariness, and something that might have been curiosity. "You found me," Nasira said, her voice that strange crackling sound, as if fire spoke through her throat. "Have you come to beg for your life, Commander? To plead for mercy?" Tarek stopped a respectful distance away, his hand pressed against his chest where the curse mark burned with particular intensity, now that he was near its creator. "No, I came to tell you that you were right, to tell you that I am sorry, to tell you that killing your brother was wrong, that I should have investigated more carefully, questioned my orders, seen him as a person rather than a problem. I do not ask you to forgive me. I do not expect you to remove the curse. I just wanted you to know that your revenge was not meaningless. It changed me. It made me see what I had become. And I am sorry for what I did, even though sorry will never be enough." Nasira stared at him, her ember eyes unblinking. For a long moment she said nothing, and Tarek waited, content to let her process, to give her whatever time she needed. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer, uncertain. "You apologize? Now? After 4 months of burning? After you have lost everything, just as I lost everything? What kind of trick is this?" "It is not a trick. It is just the truth. I was wrong. I killed an innocent man. I destroyed your life. I deserve what you have given me. I deserve worse. But I wanted you to know that I understand now, that I see the person I took from you, and I am sorry." Nasira stood abruptly, her hands clenched into fists, fire flickering around her fingers. "You do not get to apologize. You do not get to ease your conscience by speaking pretty words. Halil is still dead. My village is still destroyed. My life is still ruined. Your apology changes nothing." Tarek nodded slowly. "You are right. It changes nothing, but it needed to be said anyway, because silence would be worse. Pretending I did nothing wrong would be worse. I cannot undo what I did. I cannot bring Halil back. All I can do is acknowledge the truth and try to be better for whatever time I have left." Nasira took a step toward him, her ember eyes blazing brighter. "You speak of being better, of change? But you are dying, Commander. In 2 months, maybe less, the fire will consume you completely. There is no time for you to be better, no chance for redemption. You will die with your guilt, and that is fitting. That is justice." Tarek met her gaze steadily. "Perhaps. Or perhaps justice is not about what I deserve, but about what serves the greater good. My death will not bring Halil back. It will not rebuild your village. It will not heal your pain. It will just be another death, another loss, another act of violence that changes nothing. Is that really what you want? Is that really justice? Or is it just revenge wrapped in prettier language?" The word struck something in Nasira. She took another step forward, her hand raising as if to strike him, but then she stopped, her arm falling to her side. Her ember eyes flickered, and for just a moment Tarek saw not the fire witch who had cursed him, but the young woman who had lost her brother, who had been consumed by grief and rage and desperation. "I wanted you to suffer," she whispered. "I wanted you to feel what I felt. And you have. For 4 months you have burned as I burned. Why is it not enough? Why do I still feel empty?" "Because revenge never fills the emptiness," Tarek said quietly. "It just creates more. I know that now. I spent years believing that eliminating threats would make the world safer, that each death I ordered brought us closer to peace, but it never did. It just created more enemies, more grief, more people like you who were pushed beyond breaking. The cycle never ends because violence only breeds more violence. I should have learned that long ago. Maybe if I had, Halil would still be alive. And maybe you would still be whoever you were before grief and rage transformed you into this." Nasira sank back down onto the fallen stone, her head in her hands. Fire leaked from her eyes like tears, dripping onto the ground and hissing against the stone. "I do not know who I was before," she admitted. "I cannot remember being anything except angry. The fire has burned away everything else. I thought revenge would give me peace, but you are right. You are burning, dying, suffering, exactly as I wanted, and I feel nothing. Just empty, still empty, always empty." Tarek moved slowly, carefully, sitting on the ground near her, but not too close, respecting her space while offering his presence. "Tell me about Halil, not how he died, but how he lived. Who was he?" Nasira looked up, surprise crossing her face. "Why do you want to know?" "Because he deserves to be remembered as more than a casualty, more than a name in a report. Because if I am going to carry the weight of his death, I should at least understand what I destroyed. And because I think you need to remember him as he was, not just as the person I took from you. So please, tell me." and Nasira, hesitantly at first, then with growing emotion, began to talk. She told Tarek about their childhood, about parents who died when she was 8 and Halil was 15, about how he had raised her, taught her to read, encouraged her curiosity, protected her from those who thought a girl should not be educated. She told him about Halil's love of stories, his belief that words could change the world more effectively than weapons, his dream of opening a school where anyone could learn regardless of status or wealth. She spoke of his kindness, his humor, his tendency to burn food when he tried to cook because he would get distracted reading while the pot boiled over. She painted a picture of a person, complex and real and vibrant, and with each detail, Tarek felt the weight of his action grow heavier. He had not killed the threat. He had killed someone's entire world. When Nasira finally fell silent, exhausted by the telling, Tarek spoke. "He sounds like someone I would have respected if I had given myself the chance to know him. Someone who was trying to make the world better through teaching and inspiration rather than force. I took that from the world. I took him from you. And I cannot explain how sorry I am in any way that would be adequate." Nasira looked at him with those ember eyes, and some of the hatred had dimmed, replaced by something more complex. "You are different from what I expected. I thought you would be a monster, someone who killed without feeling, without conscience. But you were just a man who made terrible choices while believing they were necessary. I do not know if that is better or worse." "It is worse," Tarek said honestly, "because it means I have no excuse except my own failure to question, to think, to see beyond my orders. A monster acts according to its nature. I acted against mine, and that is a choice I will carry forever, however long forever lasts for me." They sat in silence as the sun set fully and stars emerged overhead, countless points of light in the vast darkness. The curse mark on Tarek's chest pulsed with heat, reminding him constantly of his limited time. Finally he spoke again. "Nasira, I know I have no right to ask anything of you, but I am going to ask anyway. When I die, when the curse completes its work, will you do something for me? What could you possibly want from me? I want you to use my death for something good. The Northern Guard will ask what happened to me, why I resigned, where I went. Tell them the truth. Tell them I died because I executed innocent man, because I did not question my orders, because I prioritized duty over humanity. Tell them my story as a warning, so maybe, the next commander will think twice before giving the order I gave. Make my death mean something beyond revenge." Nasira laughed bitterly. "You think they will listen? You think your story will change anything?" "Probably not," Tarek admitted, "but possibly. And possibility is better than certainty that nothing will change. Besides, what else can I offer? What else can I do with the time I have left except try to plant seeds that might grow after I am gone?" The weeks that followed were strange. Tarek did not leave the ruined tower, and Nasira did not drive him away. They existed in an uneasy coexistence, two people bound by curse and guilt, by violence given and received, by the slow understanding that neither of them was the monster the other had imagined. They talked, long conversations that stretched through the hot days and cool nights, about everything and nothing. Tarek told her about his life, his reasons for joining the Guard, his belief that he was protecting people even as he hurt others. Nasira told him about her studies with Halil, about the village life she had lost, about the moment she decided revenge was worth any price, including her own humanity. As the 5th month turned into the 6th, Tarek's condition deteriorated rapidly. The curse mark had spread across his entire chest, dark veins of fire creeping up his neck and down his arms. He could barely eat, barely sleep, the pain constant and overwhelming. But even in his suffering, he remained present, remained engaged, refused to retreat into self-pity or despair. Nasira found herself doing something she never expected. She began trying to ease his pain. Not removing the curse, not healing him, but small mercies. Bringing water when his fever spiked. Sitting with him during the worst nights. Using her fire magic to somehow balance the curse fire, not extinguishing it, but making it burn more steadily, less chaotically. She told herself she was not helping him, just preventing him from dying too quickly before she decided what to do with him. But the truth was more complicated. She was beginning to care, beginning to see him not as the faceless commander who killed Halil, but as Tarek, a flawed man trying desperately to find some meaning in his death, some way to make amends for the unforgivable. One night, as Tarek lay shivering despite the heat of the curse fire, he spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. "Nasira, I need to tell you something. The curse, it has been changing me. Not just killing me, but changing me. I can feel it." Nasira leaned closer. "What do you mean?" "I can feel the fire now, not just as pain, but as something else. Like a presence almost alive. And sometimes when I am between sleep and waking, I hear it speaking, saying things I do not understand. Is that normal? Is that part of the curse?" Nasira's ember eyes widened with something that might have been fear. "That should not be possible. The curse is meant to consume, not communicate." "What does it say?" "It says the fire wants to be shared, not hoarded. That it was never meant to destroy, but to transform. That I am carrying something that does not belong only to me, but to both of us. Does that make any sense?" Nasira stood abruptly, moving to the window of the ruined tower, staring out at the star-filled desert night. Her hands trembled. "When I took the power from the altar of ancient flames, when I bound the fire to myself so I could curse you, the flames told me something. They said that once I marked someone, we would be linked, that the fire would flow between us, connecting us. I thought it just meant I could watch you die, could feel your suffering as it happened. But what if it means more? What if the fire is trying to balance itself between us, trying to distribute the burden rather than letting it all consume you?" Tarek managed to sit up, his face pale, sweat dripping despite his shaking. "What would that mean? Are you saying the curse could transfer to you? Kill you instead of me, not instead of, in addition to? The fire is hungry, Tarek. It wants to burn, and it does not care who it burns. If it cannot consume you fast enough, if you are somehow resisting its full power, it might start consuming me as well to satisfy its hunger. We might both die." Tarek's expression hardened with determination despite his weakness. "Then you have to break the link, remove the curse, save yourself. I deserve what the fire is doing to me, but you do not deserve to be consumed by your own weapon. Let me go. Release the curse and let me die alone. I am not afraid any more." Nasira turned back to him, and there were tears of fire in her ember eyes again. "I cannot. Do you not understand? I tried. Over these weeks I have tried multiple times to unweave the curse, to break the binding, but it will not release. The ancient fire does not care what I want. It has its own purposes, its own design. We are both locked into this now. When you die, I die. That is the price I paid without understanding what I was agreeing to. Revenge has doomed us both. The revelation hung in the air between them, heavy and terrible. They had perhaps a month left, maybe less, before the fire consumed them both completely. A month to decide what to do with the time remaining, how to face the death they had created together, one through violence and one through vengeance, both through failure to see beyond their immediate pain to the larger consequences of their actions. Tarek lay back down, exhausted by the effort of sitting up. His voice was quiet but clear. Then we die together, and maybe that is fitting. Maybe that is the real justice. Not you destroying me or me destroying you, but both of us being destroyed by the cycle of violence we participated in. Maybe our deaths will at least serve as a lesson to someone somewhere. Maybe someone will hear this story and choose differently. Nasira sat beside him, her hot hand taking his fevered one, the fire flowing between them, connecting them, binding them in ways that transcended curse and magic. "I do not want to die," she whispered. "I thought I did. When Halil died, I thought nothing mattered anymore except making you suffer. But these weeks with you, hearing your story, watching you face death with more grace than I faced life, it has awakened something I thought was burned away. I want to live. I want to find a way to honor Halil's memory that does not involve more death, but I do not know how. And now it is too late." Tarek squeezed her hand gently. "It is never too late to change the story we tell ourselves. Even if we die tomorrow, we can choose how we spend today. We can choose what our deaths mean." They spent the following days in deep discussion, planning not for survival, but for legacy. They decided that their story needed to be told, needed to be shared as a warning about the costs of unchecked violence and unchecked revenge. Nasira began writing it all down, a detailed account of everything that had happened, from Halil's execution to Tarek's apology to their shared fate. Tarek dictated his part when he was strong enough to speak, filling in details about the Northern Guard's operations, about the systems that led to innocent people being killed, about the ways duty and certainty could be twisted into justification for atrocity. As they worked, something unexpected happened. The fire began to change, not diminishing exactly, but transforming. It burned less chaotically, more steadily. The pain remained, but became somehow more bearable, as if their shared understanding, their mutual acceptance of responsibility, was altering the nature of the curse itself. Nasira noticed it first. "Tarek, the mark on your chest. Look at it." Tarek pulled aside his shirt and stared at the curse mark. It had changed. The spiral of fire was still there, but it no longer looked like a wound or a brand. It looked almost like a totem mark, intricate and purposeful, with patterns that suggested meaning, rather than just destruction. "What is happening?" "I do not know, but I feel it too. Look at my eyes." Tarek looked into Nasira's ember eyes and saw that they too had changed. The fire within them no longer seemed wild and consuming. It looked contained, controlled, purposeful. "You look less like a curse victim and more like someone who was marked deliberately, as if this was always meant to transform rather than destroy. They stared at each other, understanding dawning slowly. The ancient fire had not lied. It had told Nasira that marking someone would create a link, would connect them. But the fire's purpose was not destruction. It was transformation. It was forcing both of them to face what they had done, to acknowledge their roles in the cycle of violence, to either grow beyond it or be consumed by it. And in growing, in changing, in accepting responsibility and choosing to use their deaths for something meaningful, they had begun to master the fire rather than being mastered by it. Over the following week, the transformation continued. The curse mark on Tarek's chest stabilized, no longer spreading, its fire burning steady rather than wild. Nasira's ember eyes remained, but no longer leaked fire tears. They could both feel the ancient fire within them, but it no longer felt like an enemy. It felt like a tool, a power waiting to be wielded with intention. Tarek found he could channel it, could call small flames to his hands, could sense heat and fire in ways he never had before. Nasira discovered her control over fire magic had increased exponentially, refined by the weeks of living with the curse, of struggling to balance its power. They were not dying anymore. They were transforming into something else, something new, marked by fire but marked with purpose rather than punishment. The realization was staggering. Nasira spoke it aloud first. We are becoming something the totems create, marked ones. The fire has chosen us not to destroy us, but to remake us. Tarek nodded slowly. But why? Why'd the ancient fire choose us? We are not noble or heroic. We are a killer and an avenger. Two people who have done terrible things. Why would we be chosen? Maybe that is exactly why, Nasira suggested. Maybe the fire does not choose the pure or perfect. Maybe it chooses those who have fallen and are willing to climb back up. Those who understand the cost of violence because they have both dealt it and received it. Those who can teach others because they have learned the hard lessons themselves. They decided to test this theory. They returned to civilization, not to the Northern Guard territories, but to neutral cities where both could move freely. They began speaking publicly about what had happened, about the execution and the curse and the transformation. They expected to be rejected, arrested, driven away. Instead, they found audiences, people drawn by the spectacle of a former commander and a fire witch telling a story of violence and redemption, of curse transformed into blessing, of enemies becoming something that transcended friendship or alliance. They became teachers, not of fire magic specifically, though that was part of it, but of something more fundamental, the importance of questioning orders, of seeing enemies as people, of understanding that cycles of violence only end when someone chooses to step out of them regardless of the cost. Months turned into years. Their reputations grew, not as heroes but as cautionary tales made flesh, as proof that transformation is always possible, even from the darkest places. The mark on Tarek's chest became something he displayed rather than hid, proof of the curse he had earned and the change he had chosen. Nasira's ember eyes became a symbol of the power that comes from facing pain rather than fleeing from it, from choosing purpose over paralysis. They never tried to be marked ones in the traditional sense, never claimed direct connection to the great totems that others spoke of, but they carried fire within them, fire that had been curse and was now gift, and they used it to illuminate rather than destroy. 5 years after Nasira, cursed Tarek in his command tent, they stood together in the rebuilt village of Kethera. The people there had heard their story, had invited them to come and see what had been rebuilt from the ashes. A new generation had grown up in the village, children who had been infants when Tarek ordered the raid that killed Halil. Among them was a young woman of 17 who approached Nasira and Tarek as they walked through the market square. She had Halil's eyes, Nasira realized with a start. She must be a cousin, a relative who carried his features forward into the next generation. "My name is Amani," the young woman said, her voice steady and clear. "I have heard the stories about what happened here, about Halil's death, about the curse and the transformation. I wanted to meet you both, to tell you that Halil's dream did not die with him. He wanted to build a school where anyone could learn. We have built that school here in Kethera. It is not large, not fancy, but it serves 50 students from surrounding villages. We teach reading, mathematics, history, and most importantly, we teach critical thinking. We teach students to question, to understand, to think for themselves. Because Halil believed that was how the world would change, not through violence, but through education." Nasira felt fire tears prick her ember eyes, but they were tears of something other than grief now. "Halil would be proud," she said quietly. "Thank you for carrying his dream forward." Amani nodded, then looked at Tarek. "I know what you did, Commander, or what you were. I know you gave the order that killed my cousin. And I know you have spent 5 years trying to make amends, to teach others so they do not make the same mistakes. I cannot forgive you. That is not my place. But I can acknowledge that you have changed, and that your change has helped others change. That is worth something." Tarek bowed deeply, a gesture of respect and humility. "Thank you for seeing me as more than the worst thing I have done. Thank you for giving me the chance to be better, even if I can never be good enough." That night, Nasira and Tarek sat together on a roof overlooking Kethera, watching the stars emerge in the cooling sky. They had come so far from the command tent, where the curse was born, from the ruined tower where they first began to understand each other, from the moment they thought they would both die, consumed by ancient fire. Now they lived, marked by that fire, transformed by it, using it to light the way for others. Tarek spoke first. "Do you think Halil would forgive me? If he could see what we have built from his death, would he consider it enough?" Nasira considered the question seriously. "I do not know." Halil believed in second chances, in redemption, in the power of change. But he also believed in justice, in consequences, and people being held accountable. I think he would see you as someone who has tried to make amends while acknowledging that amends can never fully balance the scales. And I think he would be satisfied with that, because Halil was wise enough to know that perfection is impossible, but growth is always possible. "What about you?" Tarek asked. "Do you forgive me?" Nasira was quiet for a long time, feeling the steady burn of the fire within her, feeling the connection to Tarek that the curse had created, and their choices had transformed into something more than either curse or blessing. Finally she spoke. "I do not forgive you for killing Halil. That was unforgivable. But I accept that you are not the same person who gave that order, just as I am not the same person who cursed you out of rage and grief. We have both been transformed by fire, burned away, and reforged into something different. So no, I do not forgive you, but I do stand with you. I do trust you. I do consider you my partner in the work we do. And maybe that is more important than forgiveness. Maybe that is enough." Tarek nodded, accepting her words for what they were: honesty without cruelty, clarity without condemnation. "It is enough, more than enough." They sat in companionable silence, two people who should have been eternal enemies, who had become something far more complex and valuable: teachers, partners, living proof that even the worst curses can be transformed if those who carry them are willing to change, to grow, to use their pain for something greater than revenge or self-pity. The fire within them burned steady and bright, no longer consuming but illuminating, no longer destroying but creating. The desert witch had cursed the commander with fire, yes, but only she could tame it, and only he could let it transform him rather than destroy him. Together they had turned curse into purpose, hatred into understanding, death into life. And in doing so, they had become what the world needed, even if it was not what they had imagined for themselves. Years continued to pass. Their work expanded across the territories, their school of thought influencing military training, conflict resolution, justice systems. The Northern Guard reformed its practices, instituting review processes for executions, requiring commanders to personally investigate accusations rather than relying solely on intelligence reports. It was not perfect, not even close, but it was better. And better mattered. Nasira and Tarek eventually settled in a city equidistant from everywhere, a place where they could teach and write and serve as resources for those seeking to break cycles of violence in their own communities. They never married, never became romantic partners, their relationship too complex for simple categories. They were bonded by fire, by transformation, by shared purpose. They were family in ways that transcended blood or traditional definitions. When Tarek turned 50 and Nasira 45, they received an unexpected visitor. A young woman, perhaps 25, with marks on her shoulders. A cheetah in mid-sprint, golden lines that shimmered with speed and purpose. She introduced herself as Kira, marked by the wind cheetah, a healer and guardian. She had heard of their story, of the curse transformed into partnership, and she had questions. "How do you live with what you have done?" She asked Tarek directly. "How do you balance the weight of past actions with the work of present redemption?" Tarek considered the question seriously, as he always did when asked about his past. "You do not balance it. You carry it. Every day I wake up knowing I killed an innocent man, knowing I destroyed lives in the name of duty. That never goes away, never gets lighter. But I also wake up knowing that today I can teach someone to think critically, to question authority, to choose understanding over reaction. I cannot undo the past. I can only try to shape the future differently. The weight does not diminish, but my capacity to carry it grows as I grow. That is the best I can offer." Kira nodded thoughtfully, then turned to Nasira. "And you? How do you live with the curse you cast? With the fact that you almost killed both yourself and him out of revenge?" Nasira's ember eyes glowed softly. "I live with it by using the power it gave me for something other than destruction. The ancient fire marked me as surely as it marked Tarek. We are both branded by violence, both transformed by pain. But we chose to let that transformation make us wiser rather than just more bitter. I honor Halil's memory not by destroying his killer, but by teaching others the lessons his death taught me, that revenge is empty, that violence breeds violence, that the only way to break cycles is to step out of them consciously and deliberately. My ember eyes will never return to normal. I will always carry visible proof of what I did, and I am glad for that. It keeps me honest. It reminds me of who I was and who I chose to become instead. Kira stayed with them for several days, learning, observing, sharing her own stories of healing and guardianship. On her final evening, she spoke words that would stay with both Nasira and Tarek for the rest of their lives. You two are not traditional marked ones. You did not receive your marks from birth or divine selection. You created them through action and consequence and transformation. But that makes your marks more powerful in some ways because you chose them. You chose to become something other than what violence and revenge would have made you. That is its own kind of magic, its own kind of power. The totems work in mysterious ways, and sometimes the most important marks are the ones we give ourselves through the choices we make and the changes we embrace. After Kira left, continuing on her own journey, Nasira and Tarek discussed her words. Do you think she was right? Tarek asked, do you think we are marked ones in our own way, even without traditional totem selection? I think Nasira said slowly that we are marked by experience, by transformation, by fire that tested us and refined us rather than consuming us. If that makes us marked ones, then so be it. If not, then we are simply two people who refused to let our worst moments define us completely, who chose growth over stagnation, purpose over paralysis. Either way, we are here. We are doing the work. The labels matter less than the actions. They continued their work for decades, aging gracefully, their fire marks never fading, their purpose never wavering. They witnessed the growth of new generations who approached conflict differently, who questioned more, who chose understanding over easy violence. The world did not transform overnight. Violence continued. Injustice persisted. But there were improvements, small victories, lives saved, because someone remembered the story of the desert witch who cursed the commander and how both had been transformed by what should have destroyed them. When Tarek finally died at 73, his body simply wearing out after a long and purposeful life, Nasira was with him. The fire connection between them had never broken, had become so fundamental to both their existences that she felt his passing like a part of her own spirit being extinguished. But it did not destroy her. She had learned long ago how to carry loss, how to transform it into something other than devastation. She grieved deeply and genuinely for the loss of her partner, her teacher, her friend. But she also celebrated what they had built together, the legacy they would leave behind. She continued teaching for another decade, her ember eyes dimming slightly, but never fully extinguishing, her mastery of fire magic remaining sharp. She trained others in the philosophy she and Tarek had developed, passing on the lessons learned through pain and transformation. And when she finally died at 83, surrounded by students and friends, her final words were simple. The fire always seeks to transform. Let it transform you into something better than what you were. Do not fear the burning. Fear only refusing to learn from it. Their story became legend, told and retold across the desert territories, adapted and interpreted in countless ways. Some versions emphasized the curse, making it a tale of revenge and its consequences. Others emphasized the transformation, making it a story of redemption and growth. But the core remained constant. Two people who should have been enemies became something more through the crucible of shared suffering and deliberate choice, who proved that even the darkest curses can be transformed if those who carry them are willing to change, to grow, to use their pain for something greater than its original purpose. The desert witch who cursed the commander with fire, and the commander who let himself be transformed rather than destroyed, became symbols of hope in a world that often seemed defined by cycles of violence and revenge. Their marks, born from curse and consequence rather than divine selection, were no less real, no less powerful than those granted by totems. And their legacy, built from the ashes of terrible choices and the determination to become better, continued to burn bright long after both had passed from the world, a light in the darkness, a warmth against the cold, a reminder that transformation is always possible for those brave enough to embrace the fire rather than flee from it. This is their story. This is their truth. This is the proof that even curses can become gifts if we are willing to do the painful work of change. If this story resonated with you, if you found yourself moved by Nasira and Tarek's journey from curse to purpose, if you recognized in their transformation any reflection of your own struggles with guilt, anger, or the desire for revenge, share your thoughts in the comments. What cycles of violence have you broken? What curses have you transformed into gifts? What fires have you learned to master rather than being mastered by? Your stories matter. Your transformations inspire others. Your voice adds to the chorus of those who choose growth over stagnation, understanding over easy judgment. And if you have not yet joined the Solaris Legends community, subscribe now. Become part of this journey through the desert realm where heroes are forged through fire, where curses become blessings, where enemies become partners, where every ending is a new beginning. Hit subscribe and activate notifications so you never miss another tale from this vast, sun-scorched world where transformation is always possible, where redemption can be earned, where the fire within us can illuminate or destroy depending on the choices we make. Thank you for spending this time with us, for witnessing Nasira and Tarek's transformation from curse to partnership, for believing that even the worst of us can become better if we are willing to face the fire and be transformed by it. Until the next adventure, may you embrace your own transformations. May you use your pain for purpose. May you never fear the fire that seeks to refine you. This is Solaris Legends, where curses can be broken, where marks can be earned, where fire reveals what we truly are. We will see you in the next story.